Earlier, we heard from Venerable Dr Juewei for our opening ceremony, an opportunity for a more formal introduction. For over 20 years, Venerable Dr Juewei has been ordained as a Buddhist monastic, and she is also a Buddhist Studies scholar. Venerable Juewei is now head of program for applied Buddhist studies in Humanistic Buddhism, as well as director of the Humanistic Buddhism Centre at the Nan Tien Institute, Australia. Would you please welcome back to the lectern for Dharma Talk, Venerable Dr Juewei.
Yay, thank you. Thank you so much, Zen. So auspicious greetings again, my Dharma brothers and sisters from all directions. What a gracious act of kindness it is for you to be here today, whether physically or virtually. The first thing I like to do is to recognize the Triple Gem, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Today and together, they make up the lineage, philosophy, and community of Buddhism that we all embrace in order to deepen our engagement, reflection, and in my case, scholarly investigation. We've spent over an hour soaking in the Dharma talk from Venerable Dr. Panyavati. I'd like to just invite you to take a minute to reflect on the wisdom that she has imparted upon us, where we are in terms of our Dharma speak, or our Dharma acts, or our Dharma talk. And just let's take a minute to contemplate and take a pause. At the Nan Tien Institute, where I have the privilege of spending the past 11 years of my life, we often begin our classes with this mindful pause. We call that a mindful check-in. Now, even in our meetings, we do so. And this is a part of our contemplative pedagogy to allow us to not only be in the head, but to be able to internalize good teachings into ourselves. What I'm about to share with you is a term that I have coined 2 years ago. It's called MettāVerses. What it means is multiverses of loving kindness. Not just one universe, but many, many universes. As a Mahayana Buddhist, I'm very inspired by the Huayan Sutras. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, they talk about the universes, the multiverses of Buddha Pure Lands. So I always imagine that we have many Pure Lands, many Buddha lands. My teacher, the late Venerable Master Xing Yun, sets as his life's goal to develop pure lands on earth. Now, I think we can also develop pure lands on the cyber earth. What if we can put loving kindness into our lives in the physical world, as well as in the cyber world, where most of us are spending a lot of our time? What would that look like? And that, I feel, would be the humanistic Buddhist response to many of the crises that we encounter today. The climate crisis, the atomization that's taking place in the digital world, the inequalities, and so much truth hiding is taking place in the political world and the economic inequalities. Can we be more generous? And of course, can the Dharma guide us? This brings to mind a talk that I've heard in 2014, about 10 years ago, by Dr. Laurie Zoloth, the then president of the American Academy of Religions. She told her community of 10,000 religious studies scholars to pay attention to the warnings of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, because at that time, the findings of the sciences already have warned us to interrupt our lives as humans, to devote serious attention to researching solutions to the problems of climate change. So that was 10 years ago, to a group of religious studies scholars. She's telling us that we all have that moral obligation to interrupt our lives, to pause and review what we as religious studies scholars should do to teach what kind of research we should do for the better of society as a whole. And I find that still so relevant, if not more urgent today. How should we interrupt our lives as moral agents? And for many of us here in the auditorium and online as Buddhists, how can we put that agency to use so that we can create better solutions? Just like Venerable Dr. Panyavati, how she's ended on that note, that we bring the best of ourselves, that fountain of goodness that's in the Buddha nature in us, to bear. I gave a little interrupt to the opening ceremony earlier so that we can practice this act of kindness. Because it just takes a little act of kindness, that little pause so we don't go on automatic cruise. So how did it feel to receive that message of kindness? How did it feel to express kindness to another person? And what did you learn about the impact of small acts of kindness from that little practice just now? So for those of you online, I'd like to encourage you to post in the chat how you felt when you were sending out the metta. And for those of you who are in the auditorium, is there any one person who would like to share? I think we have a microphone that can go around. Yes, there's a microphone. Is there someone who would like to share with us how there are two microphones? I see. So would you just raise your hand, please? And for those online, please feel free to type in the chat. Any brave, kind soul? So someone in the chat has said, and it says, I felt less lonely. Thank you. Someone felt the bonding. Yes. Felt a sense of a state of gratitude. Anyone in the low room would like to share? Yes, please. The microphone's behind you.
Hello, yeah, I just noticed how easy it was to do and how impactful it was, just a few words.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very powerful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, indeed, just a small act of kindness. So I hope that this little act would encourage us in the future. When we come together in a community, we have an opportunity to meet a stranger or a friend, to say something kind. No matter how we've felt coming in, whether we've encountered a bug or not on the way in, Also, if we are on a Zoom space, perhaps to just put into the chat a word, a kind greeting from whatever land we are on. Thank you so much for your continuous stream in the chat. So please feel free to keep posting in the chat. We will save the chat. This is the Zoom space of Metta. So lovely. Okay, so moving on. I'd like to share with you a quote from Carl Jung. Some of you may have heard of him as in the psychology world. But what came to my mind was this: assuming that we are driving around, and as we drive around, what we see outside of the window are earthquakes, microbes, disasters, cancer, famine. So the scene is not pretty. And you're driving along and wondering, what's happening out here? What would you do if you were driving and just seeing all these unpleasant views around you? Well, if I were the driver, I would take a pause. I would switch to the side and say, what's wrong? Why is my GPS leading me into these grounds? I thought I was going to Pure Land. Why am I seeing all this suffering around me? And I would start doing my research. And if my research tells me now that actually everything that I'm seeing out there is not the worst, Carl Jung is telling me that the worst is really inside. It's inside the car. It's these psychic epidemics, that it is what's in my mind as the driver, what's in the car, and what's in the minds of all the other drivers in the car that's creating what I see outside. And the Buddha said the same. He said it's the mind that precedes all mental states. That was the opening of the Dhammapada. Mind is the chief. So then, in my paused state, I will have to start questioning myself. What is in my mind that is emanating as all these disasters that surround me? What karma have I created? And it's not just mine, but the collective karma of all of us on this highway towards our Pure Lands that's creating this. What on earth is happening? So I want then now to step back and do a Buddhist analysis of what really is creating the macro disasters that we are encountering in the world around us. Why is that not pretty? But just like Venerable Dr. Panyavati has said, actually, the Buddha before us has already told us about the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha was like the escape path. He has shown us that escape path and he has walked on it. And so what it is now is that it gives us the confidence that yes, we can continue driving, that there is a path, but we have to know the route and we have to know the ingredients. What prep work do we need to do in order to take this path, to confront that suffering that is inevitable? That's the first truth. But to do it in a more intelligent, in a wiser, more compassionate manner. So what was the Buddha awakened to? So how did the prince become the Buddha? Because he was awakened to the law of causal conditions, also known as dependent origination. And in this law of dependent origination, it tells us that ignorance of this law is what we call delusion. And it's this delusion that shapes the nature of all things around us. So at the root of the delusion, at the root of the issue, is the ignorance of the true nature of all things. And how is that taking place? Okay, so because of something we call the primal confusion. Is everyone here familiar with the term samsara? Okay, samsara, that loop. When I hear the word samsara, I think of a movie called The Groundhog Day. I don't know if you have seen it. In The Groundhog Day, the main character, Phil Connor, I think is his name, goes on this infinite time loop. Every day is the same. And it just keeps going back round and round and round on this time loop. Well, that's samsara. It means that no matter how we drive, we keep encountering the same scenery, coming back to the same spot. Sometimes it goes on a negative spiral, it gets worse. Sometimes it gets a bit better, but nevertheless, it are going around and around. That's samsara. And according to American Buddhist philosopher J. Garfield, he said that the cause of that suffering, of that time loop, is this primal confusion, and that is the perception of ourselves as existing intrinsically and independently of that world around us. We think that we're just inside the car, we are safe from all that's happening outside the car. But in reality, it's not, because what's outside the car is a projection of our minds, and we are a part of it, which means that over time, we will be one and all the same, and the suffering will come into the car. So just like the bug, it is all a part of us. We are dependent on it. But it, the bug, can also cause our awakening. Not just Venerable Dr. Panyavati's awakening, but all our collective awakening as well. That's very interesting how this one story of the Buddha from 2,500 years ago, from a bug from an hour ago, can be a source of awakening. And it's not about just the individual. It's really the collective. We don't exist as individuals. We live in a society of systemic structures, whether it's political, whether it's economic, social, cultural. This is the systemic structure that brings about certain behaviors. And so we have to be very careful when we say we go with the flow. What flow are we going with? So we are a part of this social, collective, karmic existence. And in this existence, we are, every one of us, we are like a little cogwheel, as part of a huge cogwheel that's turning in a particular direction. And our little sanghas, we are trying to turn in the direction of our Buddha lands, while the rest will be turning in the direction of the Mara lands. And we know which is bigger. But nevertheless, in this world, we have to be aware. So what is the capitalist society doing? It is encouraging us to be more and more individualistic. We keep asking, what's in it for me? I recall a high school student who came to me recently. You know how they have to do this, I think, personal projects, PIPs? And he decided, he's a philosophy student, he's very philosophical in his approach. He has decided to do a project around how the religions teach about this secular world because he feels so much engaged in this world. He needs to be like his peers, but he knows that's not right. So what is the wisdom that we have? And I feel so hopeful, just like I am now in this metta space, when I see this young person very aware of the stranglehold of capitalism, the I being strengthened as the center of the universe in his young universe, and is looking for help to get out of this capitalist stranglehold. And then, of course, the climate crisis that we are embarking into, or we're walking our way into it, that is very anthropogenic. It's really created by humanity because of our cycle of grasping. So this is what is happening in our minds. As we see ourselves as individuals, we crave for what we love. It may be something as innocuous as a donut, but as a result, we are going to create more and more donuts, and we're going to create more and more of the sugar industry, and you're going to create more and more whatever that goes around in the world, the shipping industry, etc., etc. It just creates a whole big capitalist society around that one donut. And that's just a donut. The electric cars, all those precious metals that have to be excavated for that one electric car. Everything that we desire has that huge impact behind it. Have we thought, as a moral agent, what are we doing? Now, I'm not saying as a result we don't consume. We can't. We are in this systemic structure. But I'm asking that we be more cautious and be aware of the karma that we are creating on the one hand and on the other hand. So it's a very complex web, a very, very complex physical and virtual internet that we live in. And we are never alone. Everything that we grasp at, some cookie is monitoring us. And that cookie is sending back to us more things to grasp. Why? That's exactly how our mind works. And the cookie is just mirroring our mind and making it more convenient for us. So in the guise of convenience, what have we subcontracted and what have we gained as a result? So thanks to dependent origination, we have also had an opportunity to interrupt that cycle by looking at 2 points. One is the point of ignorance, and the other is the point of grasping. So at the point of ignorance is to be aware of the law of dependent origination, to recognize that every action has this huge impact behind it. It requires us to understand cause and effect, causes, conditions, and the effects. So that's why the study, that's why we need to cultivate wisdom. But the second point where we can also break is in the practice, and that is the point of grasping. So the earlier story about the bug was really powerful. What is our fear? And what do we grasp at when we are fearful? Being constantly aware from moment to moment. So these are our 2 points of interruption to samsara. And this is where I want to bring in this concept of the MettāVerses, where we can bring in this Buddhist value of metta, which is the unconditional loving kindness that we all have in our Buddha nature. So the good news is that you don't have to go out looking for it. It's in us. And this unconditional loving kindness is extending friendship to all, like we just did in our ice break exercise. And Venerable Master Shingen says that metta is selflessly serving and assisting with wisdom and giving charity without expecting anything in return. I want to give an example that's a more positive example in response to the bug example. This is a little chick example. So the Venerable Master, when he was young, was trying to save a little chick that ran into his fireplace, and as a result burned its beak. And because its beak is burned, it could not eat anymore. And as a little chick, if it can't eat, it will die. So the young boy at that time picked up the little chick from the fire, nursed it back to health by feeding it with water and with little bites of food, soft food, so that it can grow. And it grew into a hen that could lay eggs. So from a sick little chick, with tender, loving care and kindness, it could grow into a hen, a mature hen, that could still be useful to the family and to itself. So all these are possible with love. That's important. Metta, an unconditional love, whether to a little animal or to your family member, to yourself. So he said, we give not for the feeling that giving offers, it's so good to give. I am at the top of the world. See, I've got so much I can give you. Not for that pride, but because that is the right thing to do for our communities and our common humanity. Because we are all people, we are all sentient beings, we are equal. So bringing it all together, I think it's like this. We are a sangha coming from many sanghas together in this multiverse. We come together in our sanghas in care, in that gift of generosity. I'm very touched by the communities of practice from the Nan Tien Institute. Every member, we created this because of the COVID lockdown and everybody was sheltering at home. So we thought, come, let's create a virtual space so that everybody from home can still feel the love of others. So after the pandemic was over in the various different countries, I thought we could just dissolve the community. But no, next week we're running our 150th session. The community just wanted to keep going because it's a safe space for us all. So it is a space to help us overcome that collective greed that we have because of what the systemic structure has inculcated in us, that competitiveness that we have to survive, but instead to help us create a space of collaboration, of community that's all part of us, and to remind us all of that interconnectedness. That's one way of overcoming samsara. It's one way of overcoming that systemic structure and using it for positive effects. So this is what I think we need to do, to ride on the structures that have been created, they're familiar to us, but inject into it metta, inject into it karuna, compassion. MettāVerses. In our classroom, in Nan Tien Institute, we just held our graduation last week, and we're very happy. The people came in, they flew in from Canada, from all parts of the world to celebrate with one another. And just like here in this space as well, people from all around the world in this virtual space, from all around the state here in this auditorium, coming together. That's the MettāVerses. So in conclusion, I see that the challenges that humanity currently face outside this windows that we see, all those disasters, they're just opportunities for us to interrupt our lives. Let's recall in us that the Dharma has already given us the tool, the law of dependent origination, for us to feel secure in this world with all its complexities and challenges. We know that we are connected. Let's connect with all that is good and kind. Let's in ourselves always remember to think good thoughts, to speak good words, and to do good deeds. Let's hold everyone in all directions, always in our heart, with unconditional loving kindness. We have responsibilities to make wise, collective decisions. So MettāVerses, I see it as a humanistic Buddhist response for all of us to take first the inner revolution out into that public sphere with unconditional loving kindness. And I'd just like to conclude with this little cartoon from The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. I love it. So the mole asks the little boy, what do you want to be when you grow up? To be kind, the boy says. So as we grow in the Dharma, may we all be kind. Thank you.
Wow. It's just been so extraordinary to hear from two incredible Bhikkhuni Dharma teachers. I feel absolutely blown away, and I'm sure everyone in the audience here in person and online as well feels the same. Thank you so much, Venerable Dr. Panyavati. Thank you so much, Venerable Dr. Juewei. That was so profound.